Macroeconomics is the part of economics that deals with large-scale economic factors. An overview of the economy is shown in a circular flow of income. In a simplified version, such as a small town that is isolated from external resources, the households provide factors of production including land, labor, and capital. In return, they receive goods and services from the firms. So in return for land, they give rent. In return for capital, they give profit. In return for labor, they give wages. And labor is the most common, as the wages received are reinvested into the goods and services that the firms provide. However, for a larger town that participates in external and more complex transactions, new factors are presented that affect the flow of income. Injections, including government spending, exports, and investments, add to the flow of income, similar to liquid being poured into a bucket. Leakages or withdrawals, including taxes, imports, and savings, take out the flow of money similar to a hole in the bucket that allows water to leak out. At any point, the flow is the same. Thus, GDP can measure the size of the economy at any point in the circular flow. GDP measures the entire production of the economy, including goods and services. It is used to measure economic growth, which leads to the objective of economic activity. Macroeconomic goals set by governments are economic growth, low price inflation, low unemployment, and a balance of payments. The first goal is economic growth, and all nations want to achieve economic growth. This is accomplished by raising GDP, the value of all output. And GDP is equal to aggregate demand, which is consumption plus government spending plus investment plus net exports. So to do so, they use demand-side fiscal and monetary policies to stabilize economic growth and prevent drastic fluctuations caused by business cycles. Similar to a car ride with two paths that lead to the same destination, they are more comfortable with traveling along a smooth path rather than one that involves constant acceleration and braking. Fiscal policies regulate the inflation associated with booms of rapid growth, producing a positive output gap, as well as an increase in unemployment associated with recessions. There are automatic stabilizers that reduce the output gaps, but not enough to match the ideal growth. During a boom, people naturally earn more wages, which causes higher taxes and thus restrict consumption. There is also less government spending, because there is more unemployment and less unemployment benefits required, such as welfare. These factors decrease both consumption and government spending, causing a decrease in aggregate demand. During a bust, there are naturally less taxes because wages decrease, ultimately causing consumption to increase. Government spending also automatically increases with more demand for welfare and benefits. These factors increase both consumption and government spending, causing an increase in aggregate demand. If the automatic stabilizers do not manage the demand well enough, they use active or discretionary fiscal policy. They adjust the level of government spending or taxation with the intention of manipulating the position of the aggregate demand curve due to a change in the level of government spending. Fiscal policy can be applied to the goals of low inflation and low unemployment. If the government prioritizes low unemployment as their main goal because output is below the full employment level, they must shift the aggregate demand curve to the right to increase output. To do so, they must raise government spending, such as cutting taxes, which leads to more consumption. As output increases, ceteris paribus, price levels increase as well, leading to higher price levels and an increase in inflation. This principle describes the Phillips curve, in which unemployment is inversely related to inflation. There are two types of inflation: demand pull, in which excess demand causes prices to rise, as aggregate demand is greater than the economy's production capacity. The other type is cost push, which is an increase in production costs and higher wages. These sources cause an overall decrease in aggregate supply, because as the costs rise, less output is produced until it becomes inelastic. On the contrary to the concept of achieving low unemployment, if the government seeks to decrease price levels, they would need to decrease taxes and cut government spending, which would cause a shift of the aggregate demand curve to the left. Again, the Phillips curve describes how a higher unemployment would occur as a result. So there are four main types of unemployment. Seasonal, such as a snowboard instructor who experiences a loss of their job due to the changes in climate. So in the summer, it's too hot for snow to form on the slopes. Another type is frictional, such as a student who is pursuing a job after graduating from university and is in the process of changing jobs. Structural unemployment, such as a telephone operator who experiences a decrease in consumer demand, is replaced by the development of new technologies. Lastly, when consumption and government spending are low, the business cycle is at its trough, causing a decrease in demand for labor. This is known as cyclical unemployment. When dealing with government spending for fiscal policy, the multiplier effect makes it difficult to calculate the change in GDP when components of aggregate demand are changed, because their final impact will be greater. When wanting to increase aggregate demand, if government spending increases, for example, teachers' wages, then consumption and imports increase as well, because they are injections. Some may leak abroad, or investments may increase, causing withdrawals. In addition to fiscal policy, monetary policy aims to achieve economic goals by making changes to the money supply. In Canada, the Bank of Canada manages the money supply. When they make more money available, the aggregate supply curve shifts rightward. There is an increase in investment, consumption, and exports due to lower interest rates and a fall in the target overnight rate. This is because less money is needed to make large payments, such as a mortgage, enabling more consumer spending. Businesses are also more willing to invest in their firms when borrowing money is cheaper. This is also an increase in exports because the exchange rate depreciates. These three injections with one withdrawal lead to an increase in aggregate demand, which causes an expansionary policy. When they make less money available, there is a decrease in investment, consumption, and exports due to higher interest rates and a rise in the target overnight rate. Aggregate demand decreases as a result and creates a contractionary policy. Although monetary policy helps increase GDP and manipulate other variables in favor of the government, it has a limit. Monetary policy worsens its effectiveness as deflation increases and real interest rates rise as a result. As money begins to gain purchasing power, funds that are kept in banks grow value over time, causing the chartered and near banks to lose money. The Consumer Price Index measures these changes in price levels. The last economic goal is a balance of payments, which measures whether more money is flowing in or out of a country. So in order for a balance of payments to be possible, the current and capital accounts must balance each other out. The current account is the difference between the nation's total exports and imports, while the capital account is the net change in public and private investments flowing in and out of the country. A balance of payments surplus is a positive net balance. The receipts outweigh payments on the current account and capital account. A balance of payments deficit is a negative balance that shows payments which outweigh receipts on the current account and capital accounts. So there is an initial supply and demand of a certain currency. The equilibrium price in this market is called the exchange rate. Canada has a flexible exchange rate, as prices are allowed to rise relative to the price of the other currency. For example, the Canadian dollar constantly fluctuates compared to the US dollar. The other type of exchange rate is fixed, which is pegged to a certain value by each country's government. When the value is below the equilibrium price, it creates an excess demand and a balance of payments surplus. This causes low inflation and higher unemployment. When the value is below the equilibrium price, it creates an excess supply and a balance of payments deficit. This ultimately causes more exports and higher inflation. So when tourists visit Canada and foreign businesses invest, As the demand increases, the value of the Canadian dollar increases as well. This is called an appreciation. The other nations investing in the Canadian dollar will experience a decrease in the value and become relatively weaker. This is called depreciation. So macroeconomics tries to explain how the economy as a whole works and seeks to find out ways to make it work more efficiently. As learned, it does not focus on the trees, but rather looks at the overall forest. This helps to understand the causes and consequences of business cycles and understand the determinants of long-run economic growth.